Okay, so when considering this recipe, I live by myself and I prefer it. I want to live alone. Okay? I do. I want to live alone. And that's how I feel. So naturally, I just cook for myself. However, I have had roommates before, in my 20s. And, roommates are different than living with a spouse or living with a lover, okay? You're in a roommate situation, and most of the time, as a norm, it's part of our roommate agreement. The roommate agreement I had with roommates. You cook your food, I cook my food. Okay, that's very natural. In a roommate situation it is. When you're living with a lover, or when you're living with a spouse, somebody that you've raised children together, okay, you may want to consider those independent variables. If you're married, you're living with somebody who is a spouse, and you're also living with a lover, okay? They're two different variables. Caring for this person for your, as a part of your romance is lover, okay? And then caring for this person who you raise children with is a spouse, okay? When your kids leave home, you're kind of done with it now. You've raised your kids. You yet are their parents, and you're going to continue to be their parents for the rest of your life. But lover is a little bit more important. Yeah, you're domestic partners with a lover, okay? Okay. So when you're cooking this dish, if you are living with a lover, if Kristen's living with Randy, they're lovers, okay? They don't get kids at home anymore, or do they? I mean, does Micah live there? What's going on there? When I look at Micah's address, I don't online in the white pages. I don't seem to find it. Okay, when Jane is living with Mark, they're lovers. Huh? Okay. Okay. But that's true. You need to consider these two different variables with your domestic partner. There's a spouse variable, and then there's a lover variable. Okay. Spouse has to do with raising kids together. Lover may or may not. Okay? Okay. All right, so if I were to live with a lover, or even with other family members, such as my kids, if I were to have kids, I would naturally cook this dish for them also. I mean, that's important to do. It is very important. It is very wise, okay? But there's these independent variables to consider about these things. Okay. So now, so you can make this dish for yourself. If you're living by yourself, make it for yourself. If you're living with a lover, you can make it for two, you and your lover, okay? Now what you do is when you get to prosciutto ham, it comes in a sheet like this. It's a paper thin cut like that. See, the ham is kind of the thigh bone, or the thigh, and it has had the bone removed, okay? See, the bone is removed. This is see, it used to have a bone in here. That's all removed, and then they squish it flat. And so it's flat. And then they salt it and prepare it differently and cure it. They cure it in a special way. It's thigh, thigh, or piece of ham, piece of pork that they make into ham. So when you slice it, the delicatessen puts it through the slicer and makes it very thin. And we could write, see, here's marbled fat in it, Okay, and so what you do is you boil asparagus, boil asparagus until until, that's an L, not a T, okay? Until very, very tender. Sometimes when, here's a spear of asparagus, and here's the spearhead of this asparagus. Sometimes I cut off the ends here because they're tough. These ends here seem to be tougher. If they're tougher, I just go ahead and slice them off anyway. Because by the time I boil it, well, you could do it that way. You could boil it until it's very tender and then test the end here. Is that tender or is it still tough? I mean, the rest of it is very tender by the time I boil it. But if this ends up tough, you want to remove it. Just go ahead and slice it off. You could do it before you boil it. You could do it after you boil it, okay? Now, once you do, you let it cool. You let the spears cool. Okay, and then you put them in here and you roll them up. And you make a bundle. So here's a spearhead, asparagus spear, asparagus spear, asparagus spear, asparagus spear. You make a bundle of spears. Bundle of spears. Okay? And you roll them up and you wrap them up. Okay? And then on a baking dish, where okay. Now I'm going to have to talk about a sauce called bechamel sauce. Bechamel sauce is different than Alfredo sauce, okay? Don't confuse the two. They're very different sauces. Alfredo sauce does not have any flour. You do not use flour to make Alfredo sauce. With bechamel sauce, you do use flour. You use flour, okay? Now, bechamel, you make a roux with butter. You put butter in the saucepan and you melt the butter and then you add the flour. Then you make a roux. You let it cook a little bit. You can make a blonde roux to a dark roux. If the longer you let it lightly cook, you just leave the flame on low or the burner on low, and then you lightly, simmer it. Just lightly simmer it, and you could cook it until it's dark, or you could just cook it until it's, so it remains a light blonde roux. Okay, and then with a bechamel sauce, once again, bechamel has flour. Alfredo does not have flour. Okay, I'm going to talk about Alfredo sauce in a minute. To the roux, you add milk. It's also true you could use cream if you want to. Okay, you could use half and half, you could use heavy cream if you want it. However, you can also use milk. Just put milk in it until it's kind of a thicker kind of sauce. You add some salt, you add some pepper, and a tiny bit, just a tiny, tiny bit of nutmeg. Nutmeg, okay? Just put a tiny bit, not too much. Do not put too much nutmeg in it. But put a little bit in, okay? If you want to add more nutmeg and you discover you like the flavor of nutmeg, you could go ahead, add more nutmeg. You can. But I've made this recipe a number of times, and I like it just a light nutmeg flavor. I don't like it too much. Okay? All right, so, there are people out there who call recipes made with flour Alfredo sauce. If it has flour in it, it is not Alfredo sauce, okay? All right, I'm going to talk about Alfredo sauce in a minute. I've even taught my mom how to make it. I've taught Kristen how to make Alfredo sauce. It's very good, but it is different. Bechamel sauce is made with flour, okay? All right, on to my next video.